If Islam is inherently violent, why isn't every single Muslim in the world, that is, nearly 2 billion people, violent and engage in acts of terrorism? This question represents one of Islam's most popular defenses. Because not all Muslims are violent, intolerant, or sponsor terrorism, a true statement, Islam itself must be innocent. Let's briefly consider this logic. First, there are in fact many people who identify themselves as Muslims, but who do not necessarily adhere to or support Islam's more supremacist and intolerant doctrines. If you've ever lived in a Muslim majority nation, as I have, you would know this to be true. The all-important question is, what do such Muslims represent? Are they following a legitimate, moderate version of Islam, one more authentic than the radical variety? That's what all the talking heads would have us believe. Let's try to answer this question by analogy. German Nazism is a widely condemned ideology due to its supremacist elements. But the fact is, many Germans who were members or supporters of the Nazi Party were good people. They did not believe in persecuting Jews and other non-Aryans, and some even helped them escape, at no small risk to themselves. Consider Oskar Schindler. A German and formal member of the Nazi Party, he went to great lengths to save Jews from slaughter. How do we reconcile his good deed with his bad creed? Was Schindler practicing a legitimate, moderate form of Nazism? Or is it more reasonable to say that he subscribed to some tenets of National Socialism, but when it came to killing fellow humans in the name of a supremacist ideology, his humanity rose above his allegiance to Nazism? Indeed, many Germans joined or supported the National Socialist Party more because it was the winning party, one that offered hope, and less because of its theories, ideological and racial. That said, other Germans joined the Nazi Party precisely because of its supremacist theories, and were only too happy to see subhumans eliminated. Now consider how this analogy applies to Islam and Muslims. First, unlike most Germans who chose to join or support the Nazi Party, the overwhelming majority of Muslims around the world were simply born into Islam. They had no choice. Many of these Muslims know the bare minimum about Islam, the 5 pillars, and are ignorant of Islam's supremacist theories. Add Islam's apostasy law to the mix, leaving Islam can earn the death penalty, and it becomes clear that there are many nominal Muslims out there who simply do not want to rock the boat. That said, there are also a great many Muslims who know exactly what Islam teaches, including eternal hate for and war on the kafir or the infidel, and who happily follow it precisely because of these teachings. In both Nazism and Islam, we have a supremacist ideology on the one hand, and people who find themselves associated with this ideology on the other. From those born into it, to those who join it for its temporal boons, to those who are sincere and ardent believers. The all-important difference is this. When it comes to Nazism, the world is agreed that it is a supremacist ideology. Those who followed it to the core were the bad guys. As for the good Nazis, who helped shelter persecuted Jews and performed other altruistic deeds, the world acknowledges that they were not following a moderate form of Nazism, but that their commitment to Nazism was obviously less than total. This is the correct paradigm for understanding the relationship between Islam and Muslims. Islam does contain violent and supremacist doctrines. This is a simple fact. Those who follow it to the core were and are the bad guys, the radicals, the terrorists. Still, there are good Muslims. Yet they are good not because they follow a good or moderate Islam, but because they are not committed to Islam in the first place. Put differently, was Oskar Schindler's altruism a product of moderate Nazism, or was it done in spite of Nazism altogether? Clearly the latter. In the same manner, if a Muslim, say, treats a non-Muslim with dignity and quality, is he doing so because he follows a legitimate brand of moderate Islam, or is he doing so in spite of Islam, because his own sense of decency compels him? Considering that Islamic law is unequivocally clear that non-Muslims are to be hated, fought, and killed, or at least subjugated, as in Quran 9:29, clearly any Muslim who treats non-Muslims with equality is behaving against Islam. So why is the West unable to apply this Nazi paradigm to the question of Islam and Muslims? Why is it unable to acknowledge that Islamic teachings are inherently violent, intolerant, and in a word, supremacist, though obviously not all Muslims are literally following these teachings? Just like not all members of any religion are literally following the teachings of their faith. This question becomes even more pressing when one realizes that for well over a millennium, the West was convinced that Islam is inherently violent and intolerant. As we saw in a recent video, from the dawn of Islam up until very recently, All of the West's luminaries, from John of Damascus, born in 675, to Winston Churchill, who died in 1965, depicted Islam as a violent creed that thrives on conquering, plundering, and subjugating the other. The problem today is that the establishment, academia, mainstream media, politicians, and all the other talking heads have made it an established, or rather establishment, fact that Islam is just like every other religion. Therefore, the religion itself, not just some of its practitioners, who can easily be dismissed as radicals, must at all costs be shielded from criticism. The point here is that identifying the negative elements of an ideology and condemning it accordingly is not so difficult. We've already done so with Nazism and other ideologies and cults. And we know the difference between those who follow such supremacist ideologies, the bad guys, and those who find themselves as casual, uncommitted members, good or neutral people. In saner times, when common sense could vent and breathe, this analogy would have been deemed superfluous. In our times, however, where lots of woke garbage is disseminated far and wide, common sense must be methodically spelled out, as I am doing here now. Yes, an ideology, religion, can be accepted as bad, and no, many of its adherents need not be bad for the reasons I just laid out. This, I submit to you, is the most objective way to understand the relationship between Islam as a body of teachings and Muslims as individual people. The religion is inherently divisive, intolerant, violent, and supremacist, as are all those Muslims who follow it, though obviously not every single one of them does.